Could you share maybe a little bit about your journey, kind of your story,
Yes.
your life
Yes.
story that brought you into this place, that brought you into the line of work you're doing and you're initiating here and trying to bring about? What was that story?
So I'm a civil rights lawyer by training, and I spent about 7 years working in the U.S. in the Deep South on voting rights cases. So if you're familiar with the history of the U.S. and the South, it was a culture historically, and to some extent today, of deep racism against African Americans. And my work as a lawyer was to challenge the structural barriers, the legal and institutional ways in which African Americans in particular were barred from full participation in society. And it is really important work. There are people still doing it today. And for me, it really, it generated deep anger. And the anger originally was a great resource to me for understanding that there was something that took a tremendous amount of energy to address, and I needed that energy to continually fight to change these legal structures. And over time, I began to see that I was less effective doing that work because the anger actually was blinding me to other possibilities. There came a time when I was working on a very big, high-profile trial, and my job was to depose the lead plaintiff, the person who had brought the lawsuit. She was an older woman. She was a feminist in her day, and which meant that she herself had been challenging structural exclusion in a very traditional society. She had been a pathbreaker in a lot of ways. But she had a blind spot on this issue of racial exclusion. And that very idea that she had been a pathbreaker, but she couldn't see the path that we were on in terms of racial justice, infuriated me. It just infuriated me. And in the deposition, I lost it. And I just started to savagely just hammer her with questions to the point where she started to cry. And it was a moment when suddenly I felt like I was watching myself and she was my grandmother. And I was savaging my grandmother. There was no other way to describe it. It actually, so I noticed that in the moment, but I went on and finished the deposition. But then over time, it really began to settle in me that this was not going, for me, this was not going to be a pathway to a better society. That for me, that wasn't what I felt needed to be evoked in order to change, to transform society, to make it more equitable, to create a beloved community. And actually, that was the last trial I ever did. I quit after that and began to look for another way of taking on societal challenges.
So in that story, what I heard you sharing is, so I felt like it's like you're operating on one level of activity, and then you share this moment of awareness. It's like your awareness is moving up to another level. You begin to see, oh, what am I doing? And then you went you went kind of back down and finished the job.
Yeah.
So there's like a choice point here, right?
Yes.
So you can pause, you can stop, or you can continue, finish the job. And then the second choice point is then you can keep doing that for a lifetime or another decade, or you can quit, as you did. So there are these two choice points. You become aware, you see yourself, and then you have a choice to either continue or not.
That's right.
So it sounds like you were ready kind of to move on. So it was kind of resonating with other experiences too.
So I had a baby in between. And the baby was tiny, tiny, tiny. And we won the case. And I was supposed to, my job, though I was on maternity leave, was to write an op-ed about the case. And my baby was maybe 2 weeks old. And I'm holding the baby in one arm and with one finger typing out this op-ed. And then my sister calls. So I've got my arm up here, I'm doing this, the baby in the, she's, you know, what are you doing? You're supposed to be just relaxing with the baby. And I'm writing an op-ed, and what's the op-ed about? Well, the op-ed is about this case we just won. And as I'm explaining to her the case, she knew I'd been away, you know. As I'm explaining to her the case, she says, I don't blame that woman at all. I would have sued you too. And I'm thinking, first I'm looking at my baby thinking about, you know, what is he going to have in this world if this conversation keeps going like this? And then I'm thinking my own sister, who grew up in the same house, had the same experiences, came to some different conclusions, doesn't even understand what I'm doing, doesn't even agree with this approach, you know. And the woman who was the pioneer in the women's movement didn't understand what we were doing. And so it was this moment of profound disconnect. So before that, dropping back down, figuring out, you know, the anger kind of came back because the anger had been an important tool for me. So it's like got my armor back on, finished the job. But when that second thing happened, it was just too much. It was everything. It was this tiny baby. It was this this familial tie that there was not understanding or empathy there. And I just thought there's got to be another way that these pieces can come together. So that was really, it was that second thing that really kind of ripped off the armor and did not allow me to go forward after that. But I have to say, so that was before I ever understood anything about presencing. And I think that's important because the difference in having that moment unconsciously, in a way, and being able actually to evoke that moment, and not just on an individual level, sitting next to somebody who becomes your grandmother, but in a collective way, being able to shift an entire context, entire social context, what we think of in presencing as the field, is actually, that you could actually learn that, become attuned to the dynamics that make that happen, was a huge revelation for me. And it was actually the piece that I was missing in all of my civil rights work. What I had learned was that you could change the structure, you could order a different set of practices through the courts, but you could not change people's hearts. That was the lesson of all of that stuff, of all of that, the experience of that case and the aftermath with my baby and with my sister, was that you can do all you want to change the formal structures, but the work that is going to make permanent change is a change of heart. And that's what King was talking about when he talked about the beloved community. And that's what I found when I first encountered presencing, was there's a way to intentionally do this, to create space for people collectively as well as individually, to have a shift in empathy, to have a change of heart, to see each other in their full humanity. And you didn't have to wait for somehow a collective mass awakening. You could actually try to move the social field towards that. That was the big, when I first encountered that in presencing, it was like, that is the thing I've been missing.